table, things like rent to rent, lease options, things like you haven't got the money, you can't afford the property, you can't purchase one. Even if you wanted to, the lending process has become so slow, so dogmatic, so pedantic. It'll take you so long to purchase a property. Let's suppose you want to start like yesterday. Can you acquire a property without purchasing it? That's the first question.
Yeah, of course. So the same with many rent-to-rent options. As long as you are advising and being very clear and open with the landlord to what you are presuming and what you're going to want to be doing with that property, then it's very similar. So serviced accommodation, in terms of if you're doing rent to rent and you're wanting to utilize the property for serviced accommodation, you would need the agreement from the landlord. So it's a very similar process. So you would approach a landlord, discuss with them the rent to rent option, and explain to them you're looking to place in here a long-term contract with a care provider. Explain all the benefits, the government-backed funding, etc., which means that they know they're going to get their rent because you're guaranteeing them the rent, and you're taking that slice in between. So you can do it on a rent-to-rent basis. It just is exactly the same as any other process by ensuring that you are open, honest, and upfront with the landlord, and let them know exactly what you are doing with the property. They would need to potentially, obviously, inform their lender if they have lending on the property and make sure that that is all covered under their mortgage, which there are more and more lenders actually coming to the table right now for the care and social housing sector. It's a little bit, I'll refer back to serviced accommodation, where maybe 3-4 years ago, there weren't really many lenders on the table that were lending for that provision. And we're in a similar situation now where last year we probably saw maybe 4 or 5 lenders at the table. And now we're seeing that coming in tenfold because the lenders are starting to understand the process.
Okay, so you've taken on the property, you've told the landlord, right, I'm going to use this property for social housing. He's happy, dappy with you, has no issues. Says, right, you can take it. How are you managing his it? What type of rent are you giving him then? What's the numbers? Tell me something about the numbers. He normally gets, let's suppose, £500 a month, which is equal to 4%. Yeah. What are you giving him? What are you going to give him?
Obviously, it's very similar to any other agreement. You would need to make sure that your numbers are working on the front end first, and then make sure they work on the back end for the landlord that you have there to ensure that the numbers are working fully. So we have one of these properties on a rent to rent right now, and we pay the landlord £600 a month, which is a 2-bedroom apartment. And with that 2-bedroom apartment, we now have a contract which is for emergency housing. So emergency housing is where somebody would present themselves as homeless to the local authority. The local authority have the obligation to house these people for a period of time before they then move them on to something more longer term. So with this particular property, we pay the landlord £600 per month, and we are bringing in 2,775, something around that.
2,000?
Around 2,700.
Okay. And is that more than he normally would have gotten, or is it the same as he would have gotten, but without the hassle?
That is the same as he would have gotten without the hassle, because we knew that the numbers would work. They work for us and they work for him.
So why would he get the property go to you then if you're just giving him exactly what he would have got anyway?
Because initially,
what's the selling point? What's the USP? Why would he give you the keys to his property?
Been managing that property.
He's only getting the same amount of rent he would have made himself.
Well, he's been managing that property himself and was looking to hand it over to an estate agent, as a lot of landlords, they get tired of dealing with tenants, etc. So with obviously the letting agency, he would have to pay them a 10% or 10 to 12% a month for the management fee. He would have to pay tenant finding fees. He would have to pay for all the maintenance, any voids. that occur. So realistically, when you net that down with his 10% that he's paying out, the maintenance fund pot that he may have per month, etc., realistically, out of his 600, he would probably need to take another 100, 120 off of that. And then obviously he has his own mortgage to pay. So actually, by signing the property over with us and us obtaining the contract, then he gets his 600 as net rather than as a gross. So actually his income has increased because that's a net income for him rather than a gross income minus all the costs that are usually associated with an AST agreement.
Okay, so with the landlord who's giving his keys, his expectations normal will be like for like, so whatever he was making, he's happy with that, but he hasn't got the headache. So that's
Exactly.
really right. Okay, so that's one thing. What about the cost? Maintenance, repair, statutory costs, who pays that?
So the local authority pay for that in the contract that we have. So if, for example, there's, I don't know, a leaky tap or a wonky door handle, all of those things are looked after by the local authority under the contract that we have with them. And the great thing is, because obviously these are vulnerable people, we're helping those who need it most. When there is a leaky tap, for example, because they have representatives popping around very often, that gets reported and dealt with much quicker than when you have a private tenant, because a private tenant would probably say, nah, the tap's a little bit leaky, we'll just leave it for today and leave it for today until there's water coming through the ceiling. Whereas with this, if there is a leaky tap, it has to be dealt with there and then and very quickly. So again,
Food of hearts already for you. The lovely, lovely Miss Marsh, Jessie, you have again brought all these secret admirers with you. I sometimes feel we should turn it into more of an adult channel and have all these lovers of yours on there getting to talk to you directly. So I'm going to give a shout out before we continue. Shout out is to John Smith. John Smith, Mandy, Rajesh Madotra, who else? Lisa and Caroline, and then anybody else? That's it. So we've got all those watching. We've got somebody who's obviously taken a shine. I reckon it's one of the followers. You've got these secret admirers you keep having follow you around the woods. Reminds me of a joke, a bit of a dirty joke, but I will tell it in a cleaner way later on if we have Lakhi Singh on. If we don't, I will tell it to you as we leave, so in case you don't like it, I don't have to hear any bad comments. Okay. So you've got the rent-to-rent sorted out, you've got the contract. Contract affords the local housing authority to pay for all repairs, maintenance, etc. But you're still relying on someone to report that repair on you, aren't you? Relying on the tenant. Because it's a private tenant, so what? I mean, the private tenant probably going to be more sort of like diligent about saying, hang on, I'm paying for this, please fix it. And with the social housing tenant, they're probably going to be a bit blasé about it. How do you ensure that repair takes place then?
The repairs are taken place by the local authorities anyway. So this particular contract is emergency housing, the one I'm talking about right now. So obviously these are...
We understand the difference, because obviously this is also the type of contracts obviously determine the type of tenants, determine the type of level of service. So what's a emergency housing? Is that like a house that's got 2 sirens on it and driving around town, flashing your lights and making sirens?
So emergency housing, as I said, would be for somebody who has presented themselves as homeless or they are on the streets. So the local authority, like I say, has the obligation to house these people. And emergency housing, it's usually somebody is placed either in a HMO setting or it's a 1-bedroom flat, for example, and they are then there for, usually it's around 8 weeks, because that's the time frame that the local authority have to to help these people get their benefits kind of set up, any help with jobs, any help with mental health, etc., and get them somewhere more permanent to live. So this is why they pay a higher rate to the landlords, or to, say, for example, to us as a contract negotiator. They pay a higher rate. They pay on a nightly basis a lot of the time, but the contracts are still long term.
Nightly basis?
Yes. So the contracts that we have,
like a B&B, is it? It's a bit like a B&B, is it?
Very similar figures to that. So, for example, with the one I was just talking about, we pay out £600 per month for the rent. And then we also cover with this particular one, we cover the bills and the council tax. So our outgoings are around £950 per month. Our income that we generate from the contract is 2,775.
Excellent. Ooh, that's nice.
So we're still bringing in this is just a 2-bed apartment. So from a normal AST agreement, you'd be looking at the £600 per month. Net that right down. Even if I owned it, for example, I would probably be bringing home, 250, 300 at a push, depending on the mortgage, etc., and the rates that I have. So with emergency housing on this basis, I'm bringing in 1,775 a month net.
That's if the accommodation is booked for the whole month. Is that right?
Yeah, and the property so the contract that I have is for 12 months. Okay. But regardless to whether there are people there or not. So even if there are voids, that's still covered. So regardless to that, I always get that set amount per month.
Okay, and is the purpose of the council doing this? Are they reducing the bed and breakfast cost? Is that the reason they're doing it?
Yeah, so a lot of the time at the moment, obviously, B&Bs aren't always open, but also it gives these people more of a homely setting to get them used to going on to the next stage of the housing, for example. We also have another property, which is a 5-bedroom property, and that has 5 individuals in it. So very similar to a HMO. And this one is, again, for emergency housing. And we have 5 rooms, HMO basis, HMO layout, for example. And that is a really great one. So I manage that on behalf of a landlord. He purchased the property, renovated it, ran the buy, refurbish, refinance model on it. So he's pulled a lot of his money out. And now, instead of getting around 900 to 950 per month, because it would have initially gone on to an AST, we're bringing in for him around 3,500 a month.
Okay. Now I've understood the basics of somewhat of the model. There's lots of other questions that are left unanswered. Do you need some special license? For example, you've got emergency housing. You're going to have problems, obviously. People who are going to be suffering. People who've got some other illnesses. Like you said, there has to be a full assessment made. Are you required to have any regulatory license or understanding?
No, not whatsoever. So in terms of the care side of things, no, you don't need to be registered with the CQC or anything like that. We are acting as the housing provider. So we're not providing any of the additional care or support. We're providing the housing for these people to go into. We leave the professional side to the professionals. Okay.
And what about the fact that are you only allowed to bring in one family unit in the house, or do you sometimes find out you've got 2 different parties living in the house? Now, apart from the 5-bedroom you talked about, which is like a HMO, in your house, do you have a situation where you've got 2 lots of people who need to be housed temporarily? They only need 1 room. They're only a single mom or something with a young baby, or do they then give you 2 lots of people to house?
No, they don't, because obviously they have to go through all the safeguarding and all those systems. So they would, the local authority or the care provider would find the suitable property for said mum and child, for example, they would be looking at maybe a 1-bed or a 2-bed, if possible, for that amount of time. They are very stringent on who they work with in terms of landlords and providers, because again, it's about, for me, and obviously for working with the providers and things, it's about helping those who need it most. The income is great. The generation of return is fantastic. And don't get me wrong, that is great. But for me, it's about the compassion and actually helping others and being able to be in this position to do so.
Okay, and what's happening with what's happening on the financial side? You know, furloughs finishing, people finding it difficult, no money around, no jobs. Those people who aren't on furloughs because they weren't even registered, they were just doing cash in the hand jobs, etc. Are you finding your clientele is coming faster and thicker from the council?
Yeah, exactly. So like I say, I've been working in this sector now for probably 2.5 years, and definitely since March of last year, it's just gone up and up and up. And people
Up
from
and
all
up and
different
up.
backgrounds are requiring housing. If it's social housing, obviously we're looking at people with universal credits, things like that. And they may be, they've never had to do this before. It's all new to them. It's very discomforting for anybody who has lost a job or has reduced income now, has suffered with COVID or what have you. And the mental health side of things it's just so upsetting for everybody. There's so much going on in the world. And if we can be there to help and support, then that's fantastic.
Excellent. Okay. And you say it's obviously coming fast and thick now. Are you having to expand in that particular model? Are you having to try and pull in more properties now?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been speaking in the last 3 to 4 weeks with lots of different landlords. So landlords from all over the UK. So obviously, like we said, I'm based in the Forest of Dean, my little Red Riding Hood. And we invest in South Wales. That's our kind of goldmine area. But we are finding that actually we're speaking with landlords from all over the UK. So London, Liverpool, Birmingham, Hull, all over the UK, that landlords are getting shaky. They're getting worried about tenants not paying, things like that. And they are looking for an alternative. They are looking for something that is better, that is going to be more secure for them. And this is a great opportunity for them. So what we do in that capacity is that we have great relationships with local providers, care providers, local authorities in different areas of the country. So I will speak to landlords, and then I also speak with the local authorities or the care providers in those areas and see if we can match those properties up.
Okay. And in general, then, I mean, I'm just asking for the human side of it. Do you feel the distress that people are in when they come in because they're being moved out from their home to a temporary house? Isn't it very disorientating not to be clear about where you're finally going to be living, coming to an emergency shelter or emergency home?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we don't have too much to do with the actual service users directly, because that is obviously through the local authorities, but we are certainly seeing the pressure through the local authorities and the care providers for sure. We're seeing that with bed spaces that are requiring to be filled. I know, going back even this time last year, one of the local authorities that I work with had around 50 bed spaces to fill. Within 3 weeks, that had gone up to 145 bed spaces within 3 weeks. Which is crazy.
Okay, right, okay. So we've discussed a certain style of the model of providing housing. We've talked about the fact that you don't necessarily need to purchase a house. You can do it on a rent to rent, which is another way of people getting into the area of social housing in, what's it now, care homes or care accommodation. And you say it is something that can be managed. The local council pays for all the repairs and damages. It takes care of the social, of the mental, of the financial impact on the client. You get a steady income paid per month, irrespective of whether they provide you a tenant or not. What is the legal contract like? Who is the contract between? Is it yourself and the council, or is it the council and the actual landlord?
It depends on how you set up. If I'm acting on behalf of the landlord, then I can arrange. We arrange it in two different ways: the landlord and the local council or the provider. I work in between and facilitate that contract. Or what a lot of landlords like us to do is actually take on the management of that. So they then just get a net per month. So with several, what I do is I arrange the contract with the provider or the local authority. They make the payments into me and I make the net payment then out to the landlord. So a little bit like an estate agent, but not. So yeah, working on that basis.
So do you need to have... Okay, great. But before I ask the next question, we've got Rajesh, who's obviously intrigued. He thinks you've got a noble, is obviously making a lot of positive comments about what you're doing. Jesse says it's quite a noble cause. I think he's in admiration of you. He also asked about Lakhi Singh, and he's asking whether Lakhi Singh has stolen my helicopter. He probably has. I will find out. I'll go on the roof and find out if the helicopter is missing. If it is, it's probably Lakhi Singh flying around using my helicopter. The question to you goes: what about your contract with the actual owner? Is that a long-term contract? Is it a short-term? Is it a yearly one? What is it? A license agreement? How long can you stretch that contract for? The rent to rent.
With the landlord themselves?
Pardon?
With the landlord?
Yeah, with the owner of the property.
Doing this on a rent-to-rent basis, we would do it very similarly to any other. So the way I set those up is a 5-year contract with a 3-year break clause.
Excellent. So it's more like a lease. It's not a contract. It's a lease agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's more of a lease agreement for a similar period. So say 5 years, for example, and the break clauses can be put in as and when you feel fit. Obviously within that negotiation with the landlord. So you could have one after 12 months and 3 years, or if you know that you've got a contract that you have signed up with the local authority or care provider for 5 years, then you may say, well, actually, my break clause with them is 3 years, so let's put the break clause in with the landlord at the same time.
Ah, right. But once you've entered into that contract, and what if, for example, the council contract expires earlier? What do you do then? Can you surrender your lease with the landlord, or do you intend to keep the property and then try to get more business in from the landlord, from the council? What happens then? What if the council just says, look, we're not doing this anymore. We haven't got any more money. We're not doing this anymore. And you say, right, I've got the property, I've got the agreement with the landlord. Will the landlord be flexible enough to let you release you from, just like you release a lovely little bird in the sky? Would you
Again,
release?
it depends on the type of contract that you have with the landlord and also the type of relationship you have with them. Obviously, everything that we do is built on foundations of relationships that we build. And as I said very early on this morning, it's about being clear and open and honest about what you are doing. So, for example, if your contract that you have with the local authority is only for 3 years, but you have taken on the liability of that property for 5 years, you need to make sure that that property is still going to work on a different strategy without that contract being in place. So it's about your own due diligence. So if you took on, for example, a 6-bed HMO style property, would your numbers still work, for example, after 3 years, if your contract expires with the local authority? Are those numbers still going to work for you? Is it still going to work for the landlord? How is that going to work? So I always, whether I'm sourcing a property for an investor, I'm looking for a property for myself, or for the care and social housing sector, look at multiple strategies that work for said property.
Okay, great. Right, we've got sort of like a comprehensive understanding of the beginning bit. So the contract's been enforced, we know what type of property, we know the type of agreement, we know that it's with local council, we know the council pays for all the costs of running and all the healthcare, etc., the evaluation. Now, who is responsible for the checkout of these tenants? And are you actually not even involved in that process? Don't you go in and check that the property has been left in a good state of repair? Are there any clauses in that contract with the council that oblige the council to go in and put the property back in its original condition?
Yeah, exactly.
Decorating.
So the way that we set up all of the contracts is the property is to be returned the way it was found. So, for example, if new carpets need to be put in, if the walls need painting, if there has been, I don't know, the fridge freezer stopped working, for example, all of those things are added into the contract. Now, with emergency housing, excuse me, a lot of the time the properties are required to be furnished, not furnished necessarily to serviced accommodation standard, but they need to be functionable. So the way that we do that when we're handing over the property to a provider or a local authority is we do an inventory list. They do an inventory list as well. We cross-reference those and make sure that neither of us have missed anything off. So that just covers your back when it comes to the end of the contract.
Right. Okay.
We have had situations previously where fridge freezers have been sold out of the property by the tenants or the people that are there. I mean, it's not all sunshine and roses and all of that. There are situations that happen. This was a situation where the service user that was there was a drug addict, and he had come directly from the streets. He obviously had sold the unit to fund his habit. And with that, it was, it wasn't a great situation, but because of the contract and because of how we back everything up, we sent the receipt over to the local authority that we have the contract with. Within 3 or 4 days, the BACS payment came through. We replaced the fridge freezer.
Excellent. Okay, so we've understood that now. We've seen that there are some ugly bits, obviously. And what you're saying is with the contracts, normally they are check in and then check out at the end of the period of the contract. You're not really responsible for repairing and the damages during the changeover of different tenants that are coming in, going out. You're just responsible at the end to get the property back in the state of repair that you gave it. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, for example, if we had a HMO that obviously we'd furnished and we had AST professional tenants in there, if somebody for any reason had sold an item or removed an item, letting agents don't usually go in and check those properties or check tenants. It's usually maybe 3 months after they've moved in, could be 6 months after they've moved in. So you wouldn't be aware of that situation because they're not being checked up on. Whereas with the emergency housing or the other contracts we have, there is usually a representative from the local authority or the care provider there at least once a day.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally the rule with inventories, that once a tenant moves in, the inventory reflects condition and the items, and they normally give the tenant 14 days to come back and report anything. So if they haven't reported anything or discounted the inventory in any way, it is taken for granted that that is the condition of the property at the time
Yeah.
that they moved in. Okay, I want to drift away from that to the topic or to the saying of the week, and that is to learn from your learn from your wounds or wounds and turn them into wisdom. So, give us an example of where you have had a reason to have a wound or a wound, and with that wound you have taken it and turned it into wisdom. And obviously you can understand this is a metaphorical. I don't literally mean that you're like Xena, the princess warrior, that you've walked around with a big sword, or that you're like Wonder Woman with the large whip that makes people tell the truth. It's more like life struggles. That's right, life struggles. Things that have happened in your life that have left wounds, scars in you mentally or physically. That's not relevant, but that you've learned to turn those wounds around and make them a matter of wisdom. Have you had that situation? Do you believe in that saying? Is that a positive way of looking at your wounds or your scars?
Yeah, I completely agree. There are lots of things that happen in our day-to-day lives, whether they're big or small, that impact us. And I've had many different ups and downs. For quite some time, I was quite unwell, so that actually put quite a lot of pressure on for me. At that point, I was actually employed. I was an employee. I had to keep taking time off work and things like that, which was very difficult. I had to have a lot of operations. I've had 10 operations in total over a number of years. So it's an ongoing kind of battle with my body, which brings me down. It knocks my confidence sometimes. It opens those wounds. And actually, in one way, I'm quite thankful for those, because I've pushed myself and I've battled with this for quite, a long time now. And actually, for me, it's showing myself I can get back up and I can do this. We all have knocks. We all have times where we fall over, we graze our knee, physically, metaphorically, however you take it. And there are always better days. There are always days where things can be improved. I think that actually we learn a lot from, whether it's you call it a mistake, an experience. It shapes who you are. It shapes your mind and your body to want to move forward. If you've had situations that you have been down and out for weeks and weeks, there are always little things that you can do each day to turn those around.
Okay, very deep, I think, very high level. So, what do you imagine yourself as being? Then, are you a bit like, are you Xena with the sword, or are you Wonder Woman with the whip?
Oh, I think I'm a combination of both. I
Right.
think that actually, when I bounce back and I come back stronger each time, I'm there with my sword and I'm fighting for myself. And I find that actually, especially being a woman, coming out in this sector where it's very, quite male dominated, that we don't have to prove ourselves for anything, but actually it makes us stronger because we are showing that we can do things too. I run several different businesses. I'm a mother, a wife, I have a house to run as well as the businesses. And yeah, you just keep pushing forward.
Excellent, excellent. So that's the sword. What about the whip? What do you do with the whip?
If I need to tell people, or if I need to pull somebody up on something or call them out, that's when the whip comes out. I'm generally a very nice and relaxed, quite chill person, as you can probably tell. But you know, people do try and take the mick in that sense. We've had builders on site before that when they're there, I'm showing them around, I'm telling them all the things I need doing, and they try and way overprice. They think, oh, she's a woman, she doesn't know her stuff. So yeah, that's when the whip comes out, and I'm like, no, you
I
can't
can
trick
imagine
me.
being a builder with you, and you pull your whip out, and I'm there tied up in the whip. I'm thinking you're going to say to me, "Tell the truth, Vijay Sal," and I'm going to say, "Nice legs." Is that what happens? So would I get distracted from the whip and tell the truth, but not tell you whether I did the work properly and focus more on your nice legs or something? Is that the way it would work?
No, definitely not. I have with our build team, we have a really good relationship. But other companies that have been in and
You're blanked out.
not necessarily with the builders. If you feel that somebody is, is not being truthful or honest, or they're trying to take you for a ride, call them out. I've spent far too many years being quite quiet on that side and just taking it on the chin. Actually, you just need to be you. Call them out on that.
Excellent. Right, okay. Now, from the point of view of the wounds, how do you see those people who are now uncertain about their future? Because I think you're still in an industry, in the sector, performing a service really that is ever increasing, and it's not because it's a good reason. It's probably more of a bad reason that the economy is constricting, money isn't flowing, people aren't back into work, COVID restrictions are adding fuel to that fire. What do you think is the right temperament to have if you're in this business? Because I can understand you're saying, you're not really directly concerned, but surely it must pinch you sometimes to see how the wrong policies, I'd say, of government, or the mismanagement of this crisis by government is affecting lives.
Yeah, definitely. And it's affecting all of us in different ways. I think from my own point of view, it's affecting myself and business. It's affecting that I can't see family, which is, very upsetting. But then on the other side of things, you have a different end of the scale where people are losing their homes. They don't have the support around them. They don't have, like I just said, the support network. They are losing their jobs or their homes. And it's very concerning. It's very, it's disheartening that there aren't more things that have been put in place prior to getting to this stage now where people are scrambling around and going, oh no, what do I do? And it is, it is upsetting. What I would say is, as I mentioned just before, little things to implement each day, whether that's just getting up and going out for a short walk, 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. Nobody's asking you to do a marathon, but to keep your head in gear is to just do little things each day. And that's how I take things. If I've got something, I don't know, a big project, or if I've got things that are worrying me, I just take things step by step, break it down, and really just take your time with things.
Right. Got some comments from Rajesh Malhotra. I think he is busy ticking away his messages. Obviously, he's very well. I mean, it sounds as if he's somewhat fallen in love with your story, I think, and possibly you as well. Got lots of love hearts coming through. Got about 6, 7 love hearts. Is that right?
Oh, that's good. It's Valentine's week. Maybe that's why.
Excellent. Oh, you got lots of stalkers. I don't know which one. Yeah. And I got a good morning and a shout out from Ali as well, Ali Furi. Okay, we're we've gone through the understanding of what social housing and care housing, you want to call it, or care homes. Well, what about those who are RSJ or RS? Is it RSHs? Registered social care, RSCs are they called? Is that the same thing? Because the question comes through from someone: are you running the same type of operation when you have somebody who is qualified to have living social carers, and they have sort of more halfway housing and stuff like that? What's the difference between that and what you're doing?
So more of a registered provider, I think, is what you're asking. So registered providers would be...
Yeah, a registered social provider. I think they're called RSPs or something. Is that right?
Yeah, so with a registered provider, that would be the care provision that would be coming in and running that property. They would provide the care, the support. They are registered with the CQC or the CIW if you're in Wales. So again,
and isn't there more money in that for you? Like, wouldn't that be something? Isn't there more money?
If I wanted to register myself as a registered provider, then I would have to put into place all of those provisions, obviously meet all the expectations of the CQC, make sure that I have all the correct care providers that are around, the carers, etc. Now, for me, I'm not in that position right now. That is a lot of elevated work to do. And yes, there would be a very good income stream from that, but that's a whole different type of business altogether. I am about managing the property and providing the social housing.
Okay, so what you're saying is that's one level up then, really. That's actually providing the care and all the services that come along with the property. Yes. You're saying we're one short of that. We're just giving them the property. The council, the local, housing authority and social care workers, they come in and do the social housing bit, the evaluation.
Yeah, they do the care side of things. We facilitate and provide the property because we're property investors. We're working with investors and landlords. So that's where our expertise come in. We have relationships with the providers and the local authorities, and we have the relationships that we're building with different landlords that want to work on this side, or investors that are wanting to buy. So what we're not doing is pushing that next boundary level, which would be a whole different type of business, and going into that field fully as the carers and the providers, because that's not my expertise. I am very compassionate, I'm very supportive, but that's not my area.
Great. Okay. So we're coming to about the close of today's session. And I would say we've done justice to the front end of everything, asked all the relevant, important questions, asked about the contracts, the term, how it works.
I've lost you, you've gone quiet. There we go. I think you're back.
I'm back. Okay. So yeah, we've gone through all of the sort of like minor details on how it works. Is there a different model as well that you're running? Is that the only model you run?
No, we run lots of different models. There's a lot of different sectors within the care sector. So from emergency housing through to floating care support, full care providers, there's lots of different options. There's, I could talk about it all day. There's loads of different things. If anybody has any questions, more than welcome to send me a message.
Just give us a menu list. Give me a menu list. What type of different sort of what the headers? Just give us the headers so we can start thinking.
Okay, so social housing, emergency housing, floating care support, 16 to 24-year-old young care, 24 years plus, more adult care, which would be, those two would be more 24-hour care. Then you have bariatric care, we have bed blocking, we have kind of build to rent for social housing, we have Lots. And my mind's gone, but that was kind of 9, I think. That I
Okay, that's about 9. Okay, I'm interested in the one about blocking a bed. Is that like putting in lots of pillars and obstacles in the way of a bed? Is that how you block a bed, or what does that mean?
No, so bed blocking is at the moment costing the NHS so much money per day. So this is where you have somebody who is a patient that's gone into hospital, they've had their treatment, they are well enough to return home, but they don't have the ongoing support at home to be able to live at home on their own. So they
Okay.
are staying in hospital for a longer period because there's not the support and care that they would need at home. So this
So
is
that's respite care, you mean? Is it like respite care?
yeah, like respite care. So that's what we deem as somebody who is a bed blocker. So they are blocking beds in hospital, especially right now for maybe more COVID patients, etc. So with bed blocking, that can be used very similar if you have a block of apartments, for example, where patients can be moved to, they have a homely setting, and the nurses and carers can go out and look after them on a floating care support until they are fully well enough to go home. That releases the beds in the hospital, but they still get the care and attention that they need.
Okay, isn't that then the same as having a care home then?
No, so if it was a care home, they would be there for long term. They would be there for, maybe if they're elderly or what have you, for the rest of their days. With this, it's, for example, a friend of my mum had an operation a couple of weeks ago, and after she'd had the operation, she came out of recovery. But instead of staying in hospital for 2 or 3 days, she was moved to a hotel room to finish off her treatment and getting better before she could go home. So releasing the bed space. At the moment, I don't have the figures in front of me, but I think it's around 650,000 a day. It costs the NHS for bed blocking.
Very good, man. And that's per PCT, is it?
That figure is for the whole of the NHS per day right now.
Wow, a lot of money being wasted then, yeah?
Exactly. So rather than having somebody using up a hospital bed, for example, if they are in a care facility, say that we provide at an apartment, that could be maybe £60 a night. So there's a big difference in, I think it's around £450 per person per 24 hours.
That's a lot of money. Okay, last minute, Jesse, I'll tell you the story about Little Red Riding Hood. The Little Red Riding Hood walks through the forest. When she goes to her grandmother's house, gets to the grandmom's house, sees this woman, hairy woman in her bed. This grandmother seems to have a long nose. And she says, all the better for smelling you, dear. Then she says, but you've got such long, hairy ears. And the grandmother says, all the better for hearing you, my dear. She's got such big teeth, grandmother. All the better for eating, my dear. So with that, Little Red Riding Hood leaves her grandmother's house, trot along back home through the forest of Dean. So as she's going back, the wolf appears. Says, where are you going? She says, I'm going back to my mother's. I've just been to see grandmother, and I'm trotting back to go back to my mother's house. And he says, well, off you go. And she says, why don't you stick to the script and eat me? That is a joke. It's a age-old joke, a deep joke. Understand? I hope I don't get anybody complaining they didn't understand the joke. Next time we'll see you. Jesse, did you get the joke?
I did get the joke.
Excellent. I hope you don't encounter the big bad wolf who tries to eat you too in the forest.
Let's hope not. Let's hope I stay safe.
Excellent. Great. Okay. Take care, Jesse. I'll see you again whenever you are invited.
Lovely to see you. Thank you, everyone, for your kind comments.
Topic, very informative. I think a lot of people can start scratching their heads now and giving you calls and want some advice from you, because it was very deep and informative. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's great. More than welcome to hear from anybody who wants to ask any more questions. Just ping me a message on Facebook. That's fine, and we can pick up from there.
Excellent. Take care again from the Alternative Business and Property Solution community with Lakhi Singh, the property fixer. Apologies, Lakhi Singh has been caught off guard today with some important jobs and not been able to attend. We shall see him again tomorrow morning. Take care, Jesse. Lovely.